Hey, good morning or is it good evening to everyone listening? My name is Kalu Aja, and again, welcome to another Money Spaces with me this evening. Well, today we're still talking around the topics of the exchange rate, imports, exports, and international trade. Last week we talked about exchange rates, right? And this was all about understanding the Nigerian economy in detail. What's going on? Why is Naira high? Is this to do with imports? Is it to do with inflation? What's the interrelationship? And it was going to be a large topic if we had tried to do imports and exports, i.e., in detail last week. So we said this week, let's just do the part two of that. But this week is going to be really more about imports, exports, international trade, and then see, don't ask those questions that we always ask and always argue about on Twitter. Is Nigeria an import dependent country, right? Are imports bad? Are exports also good? Let's dimension that with data. And then what's the way forward? Like what kind of country do you want to see? Do you want to see a country that imports to export? Do you want to see an import substitution country or a self-reliant country? And which one is it really that works out best for Nigeria? So again, welcome guys. You're going to be all allowed to speak once I get through the first maybe 10 or 5 minutes just to lay out the data points. So everyone's going to speak, we already have built on data for you to communicate. So the first question is, of course, is Nigeria really an import dependent country? So how do we measure that? If we do, does Nigeria import a lot, right? There are many ways we can, measure that. We have the import numbers, but numbers are relative. So if we want to see if a cup is big, it's only big if we compare it to another cup. If that cup is bigger or smaller, then we can say our cup is bigger or smaller. So nothing is direct, everything is relative. So many ways we can ask ourselves if Nigeria is an import dependent country. I think the first one is to say, let's all look just a non-scientific study to say, hey, go look at your fridge, look around your house, and take a piece of paper and write the 10 things you spend money on, the top 10 things, or even the top 5 things you spend money on, and ask yourself, are those 5 things, are they imported, right? If you're in your house, what's the main thing you spend money on, in terms of volume, right? If you have 100 naira, where does all that money go to? Will it go to diesel? Will it go to food? Will it go to education? Does it go to rent? Where does that money go to, right? And is it imported? That answer really depends on where you live. If you live maybe up north, food is very, very cheap. So your cost for food will really not be as high as someone that lives in, say, Lagos, right? Even your cost of transportation in the north, say Abuja, is lower than a guy that lives in, say, Lagos. But the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics say that the average Nigerian household spends about 67% of their budget on food. That's very, very high. So the question is the food in Nigeria imported into Nigeria? We know a lot of food is imported, but if you really drill it down to the diet, the average diet, say that I'm diet in my village, it's yams. The diet in Benue, it's yams. The diets in Lagos, maybe rice, beans, that kind of stuff. Is it really imported? Rice is imported. We know a lot of rice is imported to Nigeria. We get that. But of what proportion is that import to your total budget? That's the question, right? So you're going to answer that question for yourself. NBS says 67% of your annual household budget is spent on food. Very high. But outside Lagos to other towns, do they really eat imported food? The beef is imported, but we don't pay forex for that beef. The beef we eat in Nigeria walks through the borders, right? We don't pay forex for that beef, but it's imported also, right? What about the fish? What about the vegetables? What about the onions? Are they imported? That's the first way you would look at this, on the looking at your budget and compare it to your exports. Your kids go to school in Nigeria, probably that's not imported, right? Your household, your rent is in Nigeria, that's not imported as well, right? Medical care, if you spend it in Nigeria, that's also not imported. But remember, if your kids school outside the country, that's you are importing. If you go for a holiday outside the country, you are also important. So that's the first way you can look at this. NBS says your budget is spent mostly on food. So you want to ask yourself: is food the food you eat at home? Is it imported? That's one way to look at it. The other way you can look at it is to look at the import to GDP data. So we take the total import bill and we compare to the GDP of the country in question. Now, if we did that for Nigeria, let's say we did that for Nigeria, we took our import bill and we compared that to the GDP. The latest figures I have is from 2021 and it's from the World Bank, right? So Nigeria would be about 28%. So if that's 28% of our imports to our GDP. Is that figure high or low? Well, let's compare it, right? Ghana is 28.52, so almost the same. So in both Nigeria and Ghana, almost the same level. But then you look at Togo is about 34%. And we know a lot of imports to Togo are actually Nigerian goods that are coming through Togo and cross the border, right? But look at Rwanda. Rwanda is about 34%. South Africa is nearly about 50%. So you then see, if you compare us to South Africa, to Ghana, to Rwanda, we're not skewed off that graph. We're just there, right? So if we're not really that high importing. If you look at the data and you compare to other countries. Also take a peek at, let's compare this figure. And I want you to remember this number, right? Look at Hong Kong. Hong Kong's import to GDP is 199%, which means they import more than their GDP. That's Hong Kong. But we know Hong Kong is a large trading hub. But remember that number, 199. Singapore is 153. So again, Singapore imports more, much, much more than their GDP. Netherlands, 72%. Malaysia, 61. Switzerland, 55. South Korea, 38. Norway, 29. So the numbers tell us that if you compare us with other foreign nations and even African nations, we're not really import, should we say, dependent, because by GDP, if we compare our imports to our GDP, it's not skewed, it's just right. As a matter of fact, we might be one of the lowest in the world, right? So Nigeria's about 109. If you look at the whole list, out of the whole list in the world, we're about 109. So we're very, very low in terms of what we import. So let me just give you the flip side of this, right? Just to close out that Singapore loop I told you about, and Hong Kong. If you looked at exports as a percentage of GDP, right, for Nigeria, right, that would be about 25%. And this is where it gets interesting, right? Cote d'Ivoire, about same 26%, about the same, right? Ghana, 30%. So you see, Ghana has the same import with us, but they export more, they're about 30%, right? South Africa, about 31%. So again, higher than us. But look at Hong Kong, right? Remember we talked about Hong Kong doing 199% import. Their export is 203%, right? Singapore, the same thing with Singapore, 153% imports to GDP, but they're exporting 184%. So these countries have essentially, they bring stuff in, they add value, they export it out, more value than they bring it in. That's how they are creating wealth in Hong Kong and in Singapore. Same thing with Ireland. 134% in Ireland, right? This is all World Bank data, like Malta, 148% exports. So we then see that if we look at just the raw number of imports to GDP, not a lot. If we compare Nigeria's exports, exports now to GDP, also low. So we see the problem is that we are importing and then we're not also exporting stuff out. So it's like we're just bringing it in, then we just consume it, and then we export very, very little. If you compare what South Africa is doing, where they are importing more and exporting more than Nigeria, both ways, right? And of course, look at what Singapore and Hong Kong are doing, which is just really, really a lot. So this is the story of the data, that what the data is telling us, that we're not really doing a lot of imports. The third way you want to look at the data is to look at what's called the current account balance of Nigeria. So current account is going to take the import and the export and it's going to say what is the net position, right? If you go back, say, over 10 years, Nigeria has always had a positive current account balance, which means we've always exported more than we have imported. The current figures today are as of June 2022, and Nigeria has a surplus, which means that as of June 2022, Nigeria is exporting more, and it's not a small gap, a large gap. We're exporting more than we are importing, right? This is surprising, I know, right? The problem is this, right? If we are exporting more, what are we exporting and where is the money going to? So some folks will say, listen, the problem with Nigeria's exports is just one export, it's crude oil. That's not really true. Nigeria does a lot of crude oil, but the biggest export Nigeria has is actually Nigerians, which is remittances. So we have a lot of Nigerians going outside the country to work, right? And they are sending money back home. Nigeria makes literally minimum about 25 billion from those remittances sent home by Nigerians. That's a big, big, big export right there that we have not really tapped and channeled into the official sources the way Pakistan, India, China have done, even Hong Kong have done. That's one big, big, big problem that we're only counting just the crude oil. If you pull up the export numbers for Nigeria, you won't see remittances there. That is just the trade part of the exports and imports. So you see crude oil, you see ships, you won't see remittances. Hence, you see that big gap where you say, oh, Nigeria only exports crude oil. We're missing that big, big, big remittances inflow that should have come from Nigerians in America, in the UK, in Hong Kong, sending money back home. So we don't see that. Hence, we think the imports are a bit much. So the question now is, I think looking at the data, I've given you three ways to look at this. Look at what you have at home. Is it imported? Right. Number two, look at your GDP compared to your import and export. And from what we've seen, Nigeria is not really doing a lot of imports. If you look at the import side, even the export side, we're not doing a lot. Then we look at the current account balance where we're comparing our import and our export, and we are still making the point that Nigeria is doing more exports than import. So it seems that this Nigeria is an import dependent country. It's really, really, really a big urban myth, right? And again, this is all we are not even counting the dollar inflow that comes in from remittances, right? If we're able to take the total imports that we make into the country and knock it off against the total remittances, you will see that Nigeria is bringing in much, much more net, right, from what the $100 that we send home and the import that we're doing. The problem really is that the remittances are not tracked. When I mean tracked, it's just whatever the CBN says or goes to the Nigerian banks, that's what we know. If I give $100 to my friend just traveling to Nigeria, he gives it to my mom. It's not tracked. He brings it into the country and he gives it to my mom. It doesn't track anyway, right? So those numbers are a lot that we don't track, and they are, like I said, officially 25 billion. I would say it's times three that number, but it's not being tracked. It's those dollars that flow back to the quote unquote black market that importers use to import stuff into Nigeria. So if you stop remittances, there will be no imports whatsoever in Nigeria because the central bank has only about 38 billion. That's only about 4 to 6 months of import. So they can't fund it on their own. Remember, the money you have in your pocket in dollars, the money you have in your DOM account is not CBN money. CBN money is the one they have in their reserves. The one you have in your DOM account is your own money. And that's the money that I really is being using to fund the import because CBN has a list of about 44 items. So if you want to import rice, you can go to Nigerian bank and import rice. You cannot. You have to get your money from the remittances guys, the BDCs, the tourists, and all that. So that's the general picture of imports, right? So what should be the way out for us? Which is the second question we asked ourselves. Should we be an import-dependent country, an export-dependent country? Should we do import substitution? What should we do? My take is this, and this is a fact. If you import, you are losing wealth. It's that simple. Every nation exists to earn wealth for its citizens. The way you earn wealth is to export. Because when you export, you get dollars. Dollars is the global settlement currency. You used to get gold, but dollars now replaces gold in how you trade. So the way it's set up is that if Nigeria exports more to Togo, Nigeria becomes richer than Togo. Very, very simple. If Nigeria imports more from Togo, then Togo becomes richer than Nigeria. It's really that simple, right? So if you want to get rich in Nigeria, you've got to really export more. It's not to look at the imports per se, but to look at the exports and say we want to have a net export number. When you have a net export number, then your GDP goes up and you create local jobs and local wealth. So net exports is the key. That's where you want to go to, right? Net exports. The question now for you is this: how can Nigeria do net export? To do net export, you have to add value locally. Remember what we talked about Singapore and Hong Kong, where they have more than 100% imports to GDP. But on their export side, it's also more than 100%. So the imports per se is not the issue. Nobody in Hong Kong is worried about the high import numbers because they have a higher export numbers. The same way nobody in Singapore is worried about the high import numbers because they have a higher export numbers. In Nigeria's case, we are worried only about imports, high imports, dollar, but we're not driving that export side. Let's even not talk about the crude oil side. The non-oil export side has really not been driven as well as it should be. So the way, of course, the answer is you want to have an export economy, but you can only have an export economy if costs in Nigeria are lower. If costs in Nigeria are higher, then I would always use foreign products. Good example, rice. If Uncle Ben's rice is cheaper than Ofada rice, I will eat Uncle Ben's rice because it's quote unquote maybe has higher nutritional value. It's from America. It's passed through FDA, so I perceive it as a higher value. If it's at a higher value and at a lower cost, I'll always buy it. Why would I buy Ofada? Because it's a substitute to Uncle Ben's rice. If it's a substitute, it's got to be cheaper priced. If Ofada rice is the same price with Uncle Ben's rice, it will not sell as much because people will say, why should I buy Ofada at the same price as Uncle Ben's? This is the mistake we're making with our import substitution, where we're replacing imported cement that is cheaper with local cement that is more expensive. We simply cannot say we're doing import substitution at a higher cost to Nigerians. It's killing the wealth that we are generating. Yes, we no longer import the cement, but we're paying a higher price for the local cement. Hence, that profitability that we have saved is taken off because we are the ones paying the difference. If it's a substitute, then the price should be lower, especially if it is produced in Nigeria. We cannot have a Nigerian product costing more than an imported product, especially when the dollar is 1 to 500. All right, guys. So I think I've laid out more or less like a framework here. We've done import, export. We've even done balance of trade. We've talked about the need to get wealth, and also talked about the import substitution part. We have to focus on the local cost, guys. That really is the way we have to go. We have to focus on local cost if we really want to drive substitutes, and those substitutes will then replace. All right, guys, super. I'm done. If you want to chime in, this is your chance. Just hop in and request for the mic, and I will give you that opportunity. Whilst I wait, I'm just going to let me add this guy. Yeah, add you guys. Request for the mic, guys, and I can give you the opportunity to let us know what you have, if you agree or disagree with my take on this. Yeah, just to look at my DMs. I always get a lot while I speak, so I have the time to just quickly jump in. Yes. Yeah, sure. Go ahead and request Smith, and I'll add you to speak. Yeah. Yeah, real quick. Yeah. So, yeah, let me just make the point again, right? The whole idea about import substitution is that it must substitute and export at a cheaper price, right? If imported cement is cheaper than local cement, then overall, should we not take that imported cement and then make more wealth the same way we see Hong Kong and Singapore doing? That's really my question for you. Because if you say you are using your own product, but they are 3 times more expensive, you can't create wealth, then really who are we deceiving here, right? Yay, Passy. I've got Sinum. Yay, Pashino. Hey, how you doing, sir? Sorry if I killed that name.
Yeah, no worries, man. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I'm usually on your space, and I get to learn a lot about global economy and Nigeria's economy. To be honest, I'm coming from a background where a lot of things about Nigeria never used to interest me that much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yeah. So I never really used to pay attention about Nigeria's economy and the politics because I just thought it was really like messed up and the people we have running things are not like really that bright, you know. So about the import, export, and international trade you've been talking about, I know for sure that we hear a lot of words like import substitution, um, ways to improve local production of rice, and I think that's been making the news a lot, and other bunch of economic jamborees that the government does. So I want to ask just a question, like if Nigeria is to focus on, say, making more exports than import and not worrying about our level of imports right now. So what kind of product do you think we should focus more on? You know, I wouldn't want to say crude oil because that's like cliche. So is there any other kind of product or services that we can offer as Nigerians that will help like improve our export and maybe take us out of this imbalance international trade thing?
Yeah. I mean, great question. I mean, what can we export? I mean, the answer is right here. Agricultural products, right? We always say this agriculture, but it's a big thing now. The war in Ukraine has exposed the fragility of supply chains for food across the world. Look at Europe. I saw an article, I think I tweeted it this week, where in England they are rationing eggs. They are rationing eggs in England. Cost of food in Germany has gone up twice or is it three times. Why? Because of the sanctions in Russia and the dislocation, like Ukraine, all that wheat not being exported, right? Now it's got tons of arable land, right? We have the largest producer of yam, largest producer of cassava, largest producer of sorghum, of millet. We have tons of opportunities here. The problem with Nigeria is we're not investing in agriculture. We think we are because we're doing all these rice mills and all that, but we're really not, right? In China, there was a focus on rural agriculture to grow the infrastructure at the rural areas, get output up, store, transport, and export, but process also locally in China and add value. We're not really doing that on a large scale in Nigeria. So, the quick answer to your question is yes, agricultural export. Take cassava. Cassava is used in China to do alcohol, to do ethanol, right, which is fuel for them. If we simply focused on just that alone, like Nigeria has tons of cassava in the ground, it's just lying there. We use it for gari and we just eat it. If we process cassava to ethanol and we export it, we could make tons of forex, and the farmers back home would make a lot of money. But you need to have a processing plant in the rural areas because cassava just has those 2 days before it's rot if you take it out of the ground. So this is just an example of what you can do. Drive up north, you see maize on the roads, drying on the roads. We have no industrial dryer. We just dry them on the expressways, pack them up, and we leave them, right? So onions are very, very cheap in Jigawa State, very expensive in Lagos. Why? Just the roads. Has nothing to do with the harvest. We produce enough food, but we can't transport it, even intra Nigeria, much less taking it out of the country. So yeah, but that's just the way we have to go to focus more on the quick, low-hanging fruits. Go to Bauchi State, there's veg fruit. I used to take veg fruit mango when I was growing up. It's still there, but the plant is dead. There's veg fruit tomatoes, veg fruit mango, veg fruit tomato ketchup. There used to be a big company way, way back in the 70s. The company is still there in Bauchi. I passed it. Why is it not working? So because the local costs are just too much. So I hope I answered the question, your person.
Yeah, you did a bit, but my problem with hearing those kind of ideas is that we're only like we tend to focus more on just the harvesting part. Like, okay, we get the cash crops and we just pack it in a bag, take it to a port, and sell it and exchange it for dollars, and we get foreign exchange. That's good, but I always feel like maybe there could be more to that. Like, I mean, we could do more research about our own cash crops, maybe cassava, come up with new cassava breeds or mango breeds or stuff like that, and maybe have fruit juice companies here making use of those products as well, or turning it into other materials as well, aside just taking it off the ground and just putting it in the bag and doing same thing that we've been doing like since the 50s and everything. And another point I just want to make is that I don't know why farmers in Nigeria are always having issues with storing their crops. Like, I know we don't have like any government support in terms of helping these farmers store their excess crops if they ever have like an excess harvest, because you can't really tell with agriculture sometimes. So like I've never seen any storage facility, any storage national storage house or facilities where we store most of the things we produce as well. So I don't know if that's a factor where that affects farmers as well. Like, I mean, they produce a lot of things, but it just gets bad before it's even consumed or before it gets to the market. So I don't know if you know anything about any storage facility available in the country to help people keep their crops if they are not ready to sell in the market.
Yeah, I mean, Nigeria has got silos. They call them strategic silos all across the country. Yeah, but how effective they are is a second question for you. And to get to your first point, right? Again, it looks cliche to say go back to agriculture, but it's a low hanging fruit. It's what we know. Even if you pack the cocoa beans, like you said, and export, that is still a lot of wealth generation right there, an employment creator right there. So I'm just saying, even the basic stuff, we're not doing the basic stuff well. So let's even get the basic stuff out of the way. Then we can start to say we want to add value with improved yields, with hybrid yields, with DNA enhanced seedlings, all that kind of stuff, right? The basics of taking yams, cutting them up, put them in a little bag, and exporting to the UK. We're not getting that right. Our products are being rejected. Cocoa is being rejected because we're fumigating the containers, things like that. So we're having to get those basics done as a whole strategy, right? But there are silos. I don't know if they are enough. There are also commodity exchange that use private silos, and all that. But it exists. You might want to go online. I mean, when Buhari came in, we sold some grains out of the national strategic silos. They are there. I mean, there's one. I passed one. Is it Ebonyi or so? But yeah, they are available. Yeah. So that's really what it is. We have to go back to the basics and start from there, right? Yeah, Pastor, thanks so much for contributing. Let me move on to other folks if you don't mind, right? I've got Nat. Hey, Nat, you've got the floor. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. Thank you.
I didn't do economics, but I'm a farmer. Though because of flood, I'm
I can hear you. Nat, I'm so sorry. Your audio is breaking. I want to check that up again. Come back to me. Your audio.
I'm off work now. Yeah.
Hey, Abuchi, you've got the floor, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Kalu, and everyone. Yeah, let me first and foremost quote you by saying that you say if you import, you are losing wealth. That's very, very thought-provoking. And a country's overall performance is simply the sum total of all the actions and decisions that the people inside takes every single day. It's very good that and very insightful that you mentioned the war in Russia, because oftentimes I see a lot of our people interested in speaking about that in international geopolitics without at the end relating it to how does this concern us. It's become very, very important that you mention it here, that we can also take an advantage of the food supply chain that we've noticed, because the world itself is a classroom. Now, without going much further, I just want to ask a few questions, sorry. Talking about low-hanging fruit and focusing on agri products, I foresee one of the bottleneck in exportation as the concept of packaging to international standard. I want to ask you, what do you suggest? How do we get enlightened in that aspect? Because I oftentimes heard people saying that in the aspect of packaging to international standard, we're not doing well there. That is one. Then second one is there any external resource that you can refer one to, like books, sites, programs that one can delve into to get more knowledge? Then the last one is, what are the institutions promoting exportation in Nigeria doing? Any of them, can you give us names? I know something that has to do with Nigeria Exporting Council, something like that. So thank you. That's my question.
Yeah, just very quick. So yeah, if you want to get the best resource for exports in Nigeria, I would always recommend the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. They are government run, but they are very, very good. They are on top of it. I mean, I praise them every time I'm on Twitter because of the quality of their website and the quality of the work they put out. If you want to start, they give you a step by step. You have to register with them. They walk you through even writing a business plan, how to price, literally how to source for your product. If you don't know what to export, or you know what to export, but what markets to go to, you can get everything on their site. So NEPC, go to their website or follow them on Twitter. They have tons of information that they can assist you if you want to get into this export game. I did write an article about export. I referenced a lot of links from their site. So you can just search my name, Kalu Aja, Nairametrics export. The article will pull up lots of great topics there. But I would say go there. Those are the go-to guys for exports in Nigeria. But thanks for the comments. Let me get Monsieur Adesanya Ibuku. How you doing, sir? Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Kalu. Good day to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I just wanted to add my own 2 cents to what you've said so far regarding the imports and exports situation in Nigeria. So, like, I just wanted to mention, we're talking about non-oil exports now. I don't think our agricultural sector is developed to meet local demand to provide for the international market, because a lot of times a large part of or significant number of farmers in Nigeria still practice agriculture manually. They still use local farm tools, not even the like semi-automatic or like this more developed tools. They still use hoes, cutlasses, and that's very, very counterproductive. If you're looking at time frame, like seasonal crops are subject to seasonal changes and all that. So you're looking at little work being done over a limited period of time as regards, outputs agriculturally. That is one of, should I say, major factors affecting agriculture in Nigeria. Then we also look at post-harvest loss. I read an article a while back that cited post-harvest loss in Nigeria at about 50%, which means about 50% of what is produced ends up as waste in Nigeria because we can't process, we cannot store. We don't have the facilities for that. Then I just wanted to mention something about processing also. The issue, like, for example, we export ginger in Nigeria. I've forgotten to what country, but that country turns that ginger into ginger oil. Ginger oil is about 30 times more valuable than ginger itself. So if you get that kind of technical knowledge and infrastructure, the facilities to process ginger oil from ginger, you're looking at an increase in forex, basically in the value of the exported products. That's just and then also the government isn't doing enough, I feel, in terms of promoting local production, because I feel this like for rice, for example, the ban on rice, I feel it's a
I think you've gone off, sir. I think you've gone off. So let me see. Can you hear me? I can just go ahead and maybe answer. I think the point about, I think also he asked the caller before you asked the question about packaging, right? I always, when I travel abroad and I go to the stores, I always try to go to products that are made in Africa but being sold in America. And I always try to look at the packaging of them. The labels that they use. I think I did one recently where I was showing you how
produced rice.
How to do this environmental labels on them. Guys, you've got to really step up.
The ban to me is just
if you are trying to export your products to America or to the West, you really, really, really have got to know what you're doing, right? You've got to work at their own standards. It's not just NAFDAC. There are other things that they look out for. Sustainability. Is it managed by minorities? In Africa's case, because we are all quote unquote minorities here would be female run. Like there's a company I know here that sells shea butters. It's sold in Costco, in Walmart, huge sales. If you look at the labeling, they give 10% to schools. They are run by women. It's community based. All those are triggers that the West will see if you want to sell your product. So it's not just to say I have a better product. It has to be organic, right? Because coming from Africa, it's got to be minority women. There has to be something to do with your giving back, equity, diversity, and all that, right? Empowerment. So those are the key things you want to look at, apart from just having great packaging, great coloring. So if you're trying to do those expos, these are the soft issues that are now becoming very, very important. Especially, how are you getting your power? Is it clean? Is it green? Is it sustainable? If you use a diesel generator right now to make products to export, your time is limited. Like I would say, you're going to start to see it come. They're going to start to ask you, how do you generate power? And if you use diesel to generate power, they won't like it. So start to change out how you work, especially if you want to export. It's always good practice for that. Hey, Roman Discipline, you've got the floor, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Kalu. And I must say, I really enjoy your knowledge sharing sessions on Twitter. So I would like to ask a question, and it relates to crude oil, where we are major exporters of crude oil, but at the same time, we spend a lot of money in importing PMS, and of course, the subsidy, which in my opinion is a scam, where we spend a lot of money on this subsidy, and the CBN doesn't end up having a lot of remittances from the crude oil sales with the NNPC. So my question is this: if with the Dangote refinery coming up, do you really think this will really ease our trade balance, or probably more questions start coming up saying that, okay, we are not making enough money and all that? What do you think the effect of the Dangote refinery would make in terms of the wealth of us generating more wealth from the exportation of PMS? That's my question.
Yeah, so that's going to be that Dangote PMS issue is something that's going to unravel very soon for us, and we'll see it, right? But let me just give you my own take on that. Currently, right now, we take crude oil from NNPC, then we export it. So we book that export proceeds, right? Then we import PMS from the refineries. Say we export Netherlands crude oil, then we import PMS from Netherlands as well. The difference is that subsidy. So if the cost of the crude oil is higher than the cost of PMS, then of course we make a positive. Otherwise, it's called the under recovery, right? So NNPC is paying that under recovery. They add other things like demurrage, storage, insurance, bank interest into that subsidy. The point I'm making is that the subsidy you are paying for is not really the cost just of the crude oil and the PMS. It's also the cost of the government inefficiency, that the government cannot have 4 refineries working, that bank interest rates are too high, that the port operations are so inefficient that they charge you demurrage day in, day out, right? So you are paying that inefficiency in addition to the cost of the refineries not working. That's why the petroleum price in Nigeria is as high as it is. What Dangote will bring is this: one, inefficiency in that process. So you're going to eliminate the inefficiencies in just the overall operation. So demurrage would fall, bank interest rates certainly would fall, right? What won't fall is crude oil price. At least the Minister of Finance and some political guys say Dangote will pay for the crude oil in Naira. Good. Which means that we're not going to take our forex, we're not going to take forex and give to him, right? He's going to pay for the crude oil in Naira. So we would lose some forex, right? Because we're not going to get any forex from him. But he should then have the crude oil without requesting for forex to buy it from the same Nigeria. He's going to then export that PMS to Nigeria. So what are we really saving? What are we really saving, right? On this, what are we saving on this transaction? Is that cost of the demurraging and the transportation and the insurance from Netherlands to Lagos. That's what we're saving. The crude oil price is still going to be the crude oil price. Should we give him a subsidy on the crude oil? I think we should, so that there's going to be a pass through from the crude oil to the refinery to the ports. The real cost really is just that crude oil. He's going to charge us for refinery, which is fine because NNPC would have still charged us for refinery. So the point I am making is that you are still going to pay for crude oil, for pump price, crude oil plus. The expenses would come down because Dangote is more efficient than NNPC. But it's not going to, what's that cost as compared to the overall cost of crude oil? That's what you want to ask yourself. So you're not going to see a 100 naira fall in the price of petrol unless they give Dangote a subsidy on crude oil that is going to buy maybe crude oil at a subsidized naira price. If they don't give him that, they're not going to see that much difference in the pump price. There will be better efficiencies because you would have no transportation from Netherlands, no insurance, no storage. It's just going to be oil pump will pump from south to Lagos. It will be refined on EPZ in Lagos, then exported from that EPZ to Nigeria. Tankers would buy it. Then that's what I think is going to happen. So some change, but not a lot. But it's better than what we have right now. Even if we still subsidize Dangote's output, we are subsidizing a local manufacturing, which is way better than what we're doing right now. We're subsidizing the refinery that's what we're doing right now. Roman, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. So just a follow-up question. So does it now mean that maybe the best time to effectively remove subsidy would be when Dangote begins production with refinery? Like you mentioned, those inefficiencies, demurrage, and because those things will be taken out. Probably that could be the best time to take out subsidy, or what do you think?
Subsidy should have gone day one when crude oil prices crashed. That was a mistake the Buhari administration made. When crude oil crashed in 2015, when it was going almost for $30, they should have taken it off then, because at that point there was no subsidy payments, right? If they had taken it off, then they should have then saved money or developed a system to only apply subsidy to the poorest of the poor and not to everybody. There is no reason why if you have a Rolls Royce, you should buy subsidized petrol in Nigeria. So but they should have taken off then. Right now, we cannot afford the subsidy. We can't afford the subsidy. What we pay for subsidy is more than health, education, defense combined. What country runs like that? So just on that alone, take off the subsidy, or say you are going to take off the subsidy 50% and then use that money somewhere else. There's no argument really about this. We can't afford it, right? Make sense, Roman?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nat, I see you're back. Let's see if your audio is working now. Nat, go ahead, sir. Nat, go ahead. You got the floor.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm a farmer, and I would say that when it comes to this exporting of a thing, is a fundamental issue that the government, if the government can make policies for our food here, because one major issue that we have about this export is when they test most of our products, the dosage, the chemical that we make use to farm, like the herbicide, the one that you use for grasses, there are some limits. But if you check the percentage of farmers, if you check maybe like, let me say 70% of farmers actually go for the chemicals that are cheaper. That's one. And they don't use these chemicals in the right proportion. That's another thing. And it affects the quality of the food. Knowing fully well that
let's stay on topic. What's your issue? We're talking import, export, international trade. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about export. Like I'm trying to say that if the government can make a policy that our food is competitive in Nigeria here, it will develop our export. Like when we accept, because we as farmers now, we are finding it difficult to compete. If you are doing the right thing, we find it difficult to compete with others that are not doing the right thing in the market. That's one. So if I buy those chemicals now, let me just assume that there are some chemicals that you will buy now. They will tell you that this chemical is 4,000, and somebody bought a chemical of 2,000, which is not good for the export. Now, when you make use of that 4,000, I'm cultivating here in the east. Now, for me to export, imagine me taking my product, and as a single farmer, imagine me taking my product to Lagos or to Ibadan, Ogun State, where they can export it. And now, what I'm saying is that if the government can like regulate our food market, not when people cut corners, because when they regulate the market, they will grade this food that even if you don't export, you can easily make your money here. And when every farmer meet up to the requirements of that export, we can easily, like, normal farmer can make money here, and also you can easily export. From there, we grow from there. That's just what I'm saying. The truth is that the policies surrounding our agri sector here, because most of our farmers are not really enlightened, as in we are not really educated. So
Okay.
we are just doing it the
But
way.
let me just ask a question. You don't have to export, bro. I mean, Nigeria has got 200 million people in Nigeria, right? I don't think we can even meet the local demand even in Nigeria. So why not just focus on getting your products, packaging them properly, and just selling locally? You will still make the market. I hear what you're saying. I'm just saying you don't really have to export. That's what I'm trying to say.
Actually, the truth is there are some products, like let's say this cocoa. There are some products that you really need to export,
Okay.
and there are some that you don't need to export, because I farm rice and cassava, so there is no need for the export. But
Got
I'm just trying to like give an example.
Mm.
If you process your cassava now, let me just give that example. If you process your cassava, like we tried it in our own side, like we got cassava, we processed it to gari. Now, when we took it to the market, we couldn't sell, because those market women now, they don't process the gari the way we processed it. Now they spent less, and their gari had more level of this what's this thing that is contained in this chemical that is contained in apple now. It
Sign.
has that high level. This sign, I can't really remember. So we that did our own
The
professionally now.
Nat, you're talking about cyanide. Apologies.
Yes, cyanide. Now they sold their own almost half of the price. So how do we like how do we balance this thing up?
So,
That's the thing.
So you brand yours. So this is marketing. Now this is a marketing question. So you brand yours non-cyanide or lower. I don't know how you can actually say that, because cyanide kills, right? Or lower cyanide or organic or blah blah blah. So you add value by communicating that value to the market. I see in America gluten-free. I don't know what gluten means, but I see gluten-free. People pay more for it. I see organic. People pay more for it. The point I'm making is, if you have something that is higher value, communicate it, right? Go online. I mean, you can create a store online and sell your gear and say this one has 20% less cyanide. I mean, that's what you want to do, Nat, right? So that way you create value, and you can then charge a higher price for that value than the way that you're going to. Might that be something you might want to consider?
Yes.
But good job. You farmer guys are the ones helping the economy stay up. Now, largest contributor to the GDP, largest employer of labor. So we do salute all what you are doing. We just hope you guys the best, right?
Thank you.
All right, Nina. Hi, Nina. I've got Nina. Okay. How you doing, Nina? What's up? Nina, you have to speak. What's up?
Hi, Carlo. How are
How are
you?
you? I'm very, very well.
I'm good. Good. I've really been enjoying listening to, these spaces as always. But my question is, you talked about production, right?
Mhm.
How can we actually lower the cost of production? That's, I mean, on every side, how can we actually lower it?
Mm. I
And
mean,
that's all I have to say. Yeah.
simple answer: power. There are many ways to lower cost of production. Just look at power. I'll give an industry: textiles in Kaduna. Kaduna has got tons of textile companies in Kaduna. They are all dead. Why are they dead? Because they are Chinese imports bringing in textiles into Nigeria. Now, Dangote himself has said that those textile importers should be arrested and jailed and fined. I think he's going it the wrong way. Why are Chinese exporters able to produce textiles in China, put it on a ship, pay freight, pay insurance, ship it all the way to Lagos, and take it to Kano, and it is still cheaper than the ones in Kano because costs in China are way lower. Diesel is 800 naira a liter in Nigeria. This is now. Textiles died a long time ago, right? So if you are able to go to the textile mills in Kaduna and say, I'm going to give you guys a subsidy, 10 naira per liter, if you guys are able to produce X amount of textiles in Kaduna. So if they produce, you give them a voucher, they get a rebate on whatever they spend on diesel. You make them compete and they kill the Chinese export because there's no way China can compete with 10 naira diesel. So you've got to go direct to industries and say, what is the cost that's making the cost of gala go up in price? Then you subsidize that price and you drop it down so that no imports can compete with it. That's just how you want to do it. Power is just 25 to 35% of manufacturing cost in Nigeria. We're not talking about the power of NEPA. There's the power of just focusing on that alone, you are able to then expand productivity, hire more Nigerians, and then, of course, market share. That's just one way to do it. Credit is also there. What's interest rates right now in Nigeria? MPR is 15. MPR means that's the rate you borrow from a bank. No bank loan is going to be less than 15%. So why don't you just go like CBN is doing and say, same thing, we're going to give you guys loan at 1% for 25 years. So they get diesel at 10 naira per liter. They get interest at 1% for 25 years. Then, of course, the cost of textiles in Kaduna will fall because you are subsidizing it directly and deliberately. In Washington, when they make Boeing planes, they get tons of subsidies because they make planes here. Farmers in America even have a different kind of diesel. It's colored purple. If you get that diesel in America, it's a different price. So they subsidize their own out inputs in America, in the West. Africans don't. We say we don't want subsidies and all that kind of stuff. So the costs go up. We've got to change that mindset. Targeted subsidies. That way you can't import. You don't have to guard the borders. The Chinese textiles cannot come here and be more expensive because they are simply going to be out.
More expensive. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
You have a good one, Nina. You take care.
You too. You too.
All right. Ijeru, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Kano.
How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent. Go ahead. You got the floor.
I want to ask a question because here in Canada, most of the food that we eat, like African food, come from Ghana.
Hello?
Hello?
Hold up, Ijeru.
Hello, can you hear me?
No, can you hold on, please, the Dark Trader? Thank you so much. Ijeru, you've got the floor, please.
Okay. I'm wondering, here in Canada, most of the food that we eat, like African food that we eat, come from Ghana. And Ghana is just like a neighboring country to Nigeria. And we are talking about exporting to make dollars to gain, foreign exchange and all that. But Nigerians can't bring anything to Canada. I'm wondering what the problem is. Because, like, everything in the store is from Ghana. Like, virtually everything in the store is from Ghana. Even the canned ofe akwu that Igbos cook, they bring it from Ghana. So I don't understand how Nigerians can't export anything to Canada.
I hear you. My export plug is a guy for export, Mr. Emmanuel. He's like my export GM man. He does a lot of exports from countries in Africa. He's very funny story. He's a Nigerian guy, but he exports from Ghana. And he gave me a story once. He says Nigerian exports were rejected in the EU. I don't know if that's what affecting the Canadian export, but
Kano, our yam from Nigeria doesn't last like 1 week, but Ghana yam lasts like months. You can buy Ghana yam and keep it for months, like 2-3 months. It will not get spoiled.
Yeah, that's fine. But he told me? He told me that he went to Ghana and he took the Nigerian, he cut the yam head from Nigeria. He took them to Ghana, planted them in Ghana, and he exports them from Ghana. So he's literally exporting Nigerian yams from Ghana, and he's able to go to many countries from Ghana. But if he does this exact same thing from Nigeria, they get rejected. So it could be that the controls for exports, the administrative part of the Ghanaian export side is better managed than the Nigerian side. It could be that, so that you see that if it's coming from Nigeria, ex-Nigeria, it's rejected. Hence, you only see Ghanaian products. But if you take someone like him as an example, you can see he's a Nigerian guy. The products are Nigerian, but he's able to export them. So your point is valid, but I think it really has to do with that regulatory side of how we are liaising with the import guys in those countries. If you go online, when I was doing research for exports, I went online to the international trade, whatever, where you plug in the code, like you can plug in cocoa, and you see all the restrictions on cocoa. When I do Nigeria cocoa, the flag will pop up. You see banned in this country, banned in Japan, China. They'll tell you because of chemical this. For cocoa, that was for Nigeria. And many other products. When you plug in Nigeria cocoa, you see that restriction. If you plug in Cote d'Ivoire cocoa, no restriction, right? So these are things that are there. Those flags are there. And it's a fact that we have to actually go and work to get in of. Like I said, the NEPC guys are doing a good job, but literally we have to also learn those practices, not to spray the entire container, because that introduces pesticides, and you know how we both feel about pesticides. So that's what's really going on, really. Jero,
Thank you very much. Thank you. I can understand now.
All right, super nice. Thank
because
you so
even the aqua that I mentioned is in a tin. They had to package it in a tin. So I was wondering, can't Nigerians package it in a tin too?
You'll be surprised it's from here, but hey, we don't know. I mean, all props to Ghana, but we have to get our own act together. That's really what's going on. If we focus on it, if there's money to be made in that, people say there's money to be made in it, then we'll focus on it and we'll get it right. For now, I don't think there are enough stories of farmers making millions of dollars from exports. So you don't see Nigerians going there a lot. I think very soon you're going to start to hear stories. This guy I'm telling you about, right? He does 15 trailers of just cashew nuts. He does a lot of yams, cashew, pineapples, and he will tell me this stuff, and I'm like, wow. He buys cashews from a lady in Nsukka or so, and all that lady does all year round is to buy cashews and store. And he goes to her and he's paying her like 15 million. So every year, that's her job. She just buys cashew from farmers and keeps in her compound, and he comes once a year and he clears everything, and she gets that double-digit check. So good.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Hey, Dark Trader, I've got you, sir. Dark.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. So I would like to know, as a young person starting up, what's the capital required for starting up exportation from Nigeria?
So, guy, I think again, just to refer to what my export guy told me, it depends on what you're exporting, right? We asked him this exact same question in the spaces that we had here. He said, if you want to start off exports, do those small spices first. Maybe you want to take ground crayfish or pepper. That doesn't cost lots of money. If you want to, imagine if you buy 100,000 or 1 million worth of dried crayfish or dried pepper, and then you pack it in Ziploc bags and sell. That's not going to be a lot of money, right, for you to do just on pepper or crayfish. You can get away with that. But when you start talking about yams or cocoa, that's not going to be a lot, because imagine you have to fill a container with yams or cocoa. It's going to need more than 1 million. So it depends on the export product. That's how I would answer that. If you are going by air, if you're just going to be to put 2 bags of crayfish and export to Canada, it's less capital than if you are exporting a container of pineapples. That's how I'll say it, or palm oil, right? So your startup capital depends really on what you want to export. If you go to that NEPC website, you are able to do your costing. You can put in the product you want to export. They will show you a costing. You can plug in even your export, import duties, insurance, all there, and actually see your costing. So that's the answer. It's what you want to do that determines the amount of capital that you need. Does that work for you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I've got K. Aye Mommy. Sorry if I got.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kalu. I want to thank you especially for this privilege. The intro that you gave to us really was mind blowing. Where you try to balance import and exports, and of course, the data you rolled out also, right? Where I have never thought of those data that Singapore and others, they also import, and yet they are thriving nations, right? So I appreciate this, and I'm going with what you said. Like you said, if you import more than you export, of course, you don't expect to be a wealthy nation. Like you gave the analogy that if we import, if we export to Togo, we'll be richer than the Togo, and so on. That just drove something out of me, and I started looking inwardly. That it seemed the problem we actually have in the country is our investment in research. Because from my background, I know Nigeria is so blessed, right? We try to import just crude oil and maybe a few agricultural products, but we have not really maximized the potential of what we have in the country. Just this evening I was talking to someone. I said, do you know that we have not actually researched on neem leaves, that is dogoyaro leaf? That dogoyaro is so potent that we can make a whole lot of money from even dogoyaro. So we are not investing in research itself. I told someone also that if Nigeria should exploit the iron ore deposits that we have in Kogi State alone, what we'll be getting from iron ore deposit from Kogi State will be much more than what we are getting from crude oil. And I went further to say, do you know the cost of crude oil? Crude oil per liter is just about 214 naira per liter. But if you took palm oil is 1,000 naira per liter. Meaning that palm oil is even more profitable than crude oil. Yet, we have neglected our agricultural products, and we have decided to go with crude oil its emergence. So this just triggered some kind of thoughts in me that we need to invest more in research. Because when we invest in research, then we can take even some things that we import them, we make them better, and we export. So that way, our trade balance will get better, and we become a more wealthy nation. I'm just trying to leverage on your introduction that truly, if we can invest more in research, we can have more things by exporting the things Nigeria has been blessed with. These are just a few things that I feel I should also add to some of the things you've said. Thank you. Hello. Oh.
Hi, Kule. Thank you, Kay. Great comments on the iron ore side and all that. I know iron ore in Nigeria is said to have very low iron content. That's why Ajakuta is really not working. But yeah, let's see how it goes. Kule, but your point about research is spot on. We've got to do lots more. But even the ones that we've done research on, the cocoa, the cassava, we're not doing a lot on that. So that's just a point to make again. Kule Akinwole, you've got the floor, sir.
Okay, hi Kalu.
How you doing?
Good to hear from you. Good for what you are doing here. All right, so I happen to want to talk about an area people are not really paying attention to, which is the processing company. And it's so funny that one of the challenges they are having and they will still have is with exporter. It's those that export. They becomes their major competitors on the field. I happens to I'm doing some sort of trade around do cashew, Bomosh and all of that, and sort of see how this Julius Berger was sort of struggling in terms of getting commodity, getting cashew. I see firsthand where because we already have the Indians around. Oh, hello.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so because we already have the Indians around who are ready to buy it at any price from the agent. And so, and they were trying to get it because the KOR too matters in terms of what they will get. So I just see that sort of struggle instead of Nigeria want to make money from export, but the local processing company has to want to buy the good price, but they can't compete at the price at those sort of the price because the exporter will buy better, will buy more because he already has his, letter to buy at any price that he pays him because of the dollar he will make from it. So, so I see a two-way challenge, and sort of look at how government policy has to come to balance this sort of area. So
I think. Go ahead, Kole. Go ahead.
my
Sorry.
second thing is that as many as anybody who source wanted to have a flair of good money in agriculture should just try commodity, even if it is trading locally here. When you understand the business, I just wanted to say that to people looking for opportunities to look at that area. It's a trade. It's something people can go into. I've seen how it works and it's sweet. All right, so that's my own contribution. Hope policies so that can look into this sort of things, this sort of challenges for local processing company because they will still have issues going forward in terms of the export. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think the key point, Kule, you made, and I want to emphasize that there's a big opportunity in this post-processing and even storage for agriculture, guys. Simply because you want to get into agriculture does not mean you have to be a farmer, right? If you have a place in Lagos, like a little place you can do a warehouse where you can have climate control, pest control, raised floors, and you can have those men bring in tomatoes, plantains that rot 2 or 3 days. They can bring it to your warehouse, you can store it there, you can start charge them rent. That's also possible. You have warehouses waiting away, right? Convert it to, you have during maize, buy maize, cold freeze the thing, keep it there. And out of maize season, you are bringing out your maize and people are eating orange. After orange season, you still have oranges. You go to America, there are mangoes, bananas in America are 24 and between 12 months of the year. But in Nigeria, we only see oranges during orange season or during election season, all that kind of stuff. So storage, post-processing, very, very important. Have you guys ever seen an abattoir in Nigeria before? I assure you, if you see an abattoir, you will never ever eat meat in your life again in Nigeria. So what is difficult in someone setting up in, say, Lagos? Just a small abattoir, maybe 2 or 3 cows a week in Lekki. The processing of the byproduct, not the beef, actually gives you more money. The blood, the meat, the skin, the bones, you actually get more money from those guys than the actual beef. But if you go to where they slaughter animals for you to eat in all the cities, you will pass out, right? And all that waste, no one is collecting the blood or the meals and all that. So we have to start to think about the value chain. Look at Lekki, there's no indoor market where they grow agroponics, say vegetables for Lekki market or tomatoes or even slaughter animals. These are all opportunities in the agri space, insurance, storage, processing, logistics, packaging, online market where you can buy raw vegetables and it's shipped to you. These are all things we can do to make money and to plug into that agri space without even talking about export, right? Just all stuff we can do. Thank you so much, Kule. Let's get Esikinrin, Esin Can Rain, Chair 2090. How are you, sir? Go for it. You're unmuted, but I can't hear you, sir. Okay, going once, going twice. Let me get Udo. Udo, hi, how you doing?
Hi, Carlo. It's
Hey, what's
Udo.
up?
It's
Go ahead.
Udo, not Udo.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I've listened carefully, right? And I think we've all made valid point. But there's one thing, something that's not coming out clearly, is the fact that I think the main problem we have in Nigeria is the cost of production is high. If we don't have power, how should people set up factories to produce? If the transportation system is difficult, so it's expensive getting from your warehouse to the port to export, and at the port you can't easily export, those things make export unfavorable. It makes production unfavorable, it makes export unfavorable. So what's the incentive for anyone to go into manufacturing when all your cost is going to be attributed to power, and then you wouldn't be able to make a profit, or then you have to sell above market price to make a profit? I've always been of the opinion that business people want to make money. Nobody will import if it is cheaper to produce, right? So until we make things, until we make the input cheaper and affordable, and we make the conditions friendly for investors to come in and set up factories and warehouses, and I don't think anything is going to change, to be honest. It's not about the opportunity. Most times it's all about the cost of doing business and the ease of doing business. I think that's all I just wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think that's the point I also made at the very, very beginning. If you don't have lower cost of production in Nigeria, then the export story is going to be a pipe dream. There is no way you can process at all to export if power is expensive. Hence, you see all of our exports are really just raw commodity exports. We're not stupid. We know that if we process cocoa, we get more money. But if you process cocoa in Nigeria, the profit you would make is going to be eaten up by diesel. So it's cheaper to simply just bag the raw cocoa beans and export and just cash out. That's what's good on in Nigeria.
Exactly.
If you drop the cost of post production power in Nigeria, then all the cocoa guys will start to do processing in Nigeria before they export. They're not silly. They know the costing as well, but it's just too expensive
Just too expensive.
And
that was my sentiment about this the ban on importation of rice. I felt like people importing rice are not stupid. If it was easier to produce rice in Nigeria, they would have produced rice in Nigeria. So it was all about making the product, making the cost of product. It was all about reducing the cost of production and ensuring that people invested in it. It wasn't really about banning or stopping the importation. I felt like that was just to distract people. But the main issue is that we need power to be able to produce and produce competitively. Until we have that, then we're just wasting our time.
Yeah, let's talk about the burden of rice, right? And I've bashed the federal governments all day, but let me look at it from their own side. They see that they are trying to produce rice locally, and they see that imports of foreign rice is taking away market share from the local rice, which means that even if they invest in local rice, the local rice does not sell, so does not pay back these loans that they've taken. So in terms of their thought process, you could see where they were going to when they closed the border. If we restrict the borders for foreign rice, then Nigerians will be forced to buy the local rice. I get it. The problem is this, right? Rice is a product that the demand for rice far outstrips the supply. Even if you allow the foreign and the local rice currently right now, it's still not meeting demand. How do you know? Because prices are still high. The way you know that local supply of rice has met demand is when prices start to fall in Nigeria. As long as prices are still going up, that means the demand is still up and we have not met that demand. Look, foreign rice is cheaper than local rice simply because it costs cheaper to make rice in Thailand or Vietnam or China or India and import or export it to Nigeria. Hence, in addition to what they are doing with giving loans to the local rice mills in Nigeria, the central bank should have focused squarely on local captive power for these rice mills. If the local rice mills could have gotten power and other stuff to mill rice, right? So the rice paddy come from Kirby, from Abakaleke, from Ofada, is able to be milled, is able to be transported and distributed, just like how you had Kirby and Lagos doing that lake rice. That was a winner. That was a wonderful project. If we had sustained that with enough supply of cheap rice, then you gradually start to wind back this imported rice issue. You can't stop imports from policing the borders. You kill imports by making the substitutes cheaper. You can't stop people from getting something that is cheap. It doesn't make any sense. Even the custom person has a family, so he would also allow those imports to go. But if the local is cheaper, then why would he bother? Have you seen anybody importing pure water to Nigeria? Have you seen anyone do that? No, because pure water is still cheaper in Nigeria than if you went to China and imported it all the way. Sparkling water, yes, they import sparkling water because it's more expensive. But normal tap drinking water is still cheaper because it's quote unquote not healthy. So it's easy to just pack it in a bag and throw it into the country. Let's get Aliu Noski. M.U. Ayad. How you doing, sir? Hope you can hear me, Noski.
Hello, good evening.
How are you today?
Fine, thank you, Mr. Aja. Nice to see this setup. So one of my comments is regarding the forex issue. I think one of the most important policies we would like to see is for forex to be floated. Any incentive you want to give to manufacturers, I believe, should be given at the output stage. If you want to encourage manufacturing, you don't give dollars at a subsidized rate because there's a lot of foul play. For instance, you tell someone to get dollars in CBN at 400 and say 30, 440, and then you're giving them maybe $100,000. So by the time they take $100,000 at that rate, and then some BDC guy offers them 700 naira per that dollar, and then they are able to convert those profits in maybe a week's time, what incentive would keep them, if not maybe they have some serious patriotism, what would keep them from just trading those dollars in the black market and just forgetting about the manufacturing project? I think a lot of that has happened in the past 6 years since this administration came. So maybe for the next administration, it would be really encouraging to see something like that happen. That's one of my remarks. And then I think the other thing I wanted to also comment on, yes, I think you spoke about cost of production, which is really very important. And another thing, for instance, you're exporting a product that we are not really that specialized in, maybe processing that product, especially agricultural products, or maybe the demand is not there. Maybe in Africa and our neighboring countries, maybe the need for processing that product is not there. So we have to really think in contexts for anything we're doing. We just don't look at maybe theoretical economics to say you process products to get more profit. I believe you mentioned something about cocoa. I think it was cocoa you mentioned, that processing would be more expensive. So it makes more sense to just export it at that first stage. So I think those are my comments and remarks.
So sorry about that, guy. I was on mute, right? So thanks you so much for your comments. Since you spoke about the currency and the peg and the floating, let's just try to just dimension that out just a little bit. So right now, the Central Bank of Nigeria maintains a pegged or a fixed exchange rate, which means we are pegging the naira to the dollar, and we maintain that peg by having a foreign reserve. So what the central bank does is that it says the NAFEX rate is 466. If the central bank wants the NAFEX rate to fall, i.e., it wants the dollar to fall, it will supply more dollars to the market and dollar will come down. If the central bank wants dollar to go up, it would reduce supply of dollars to the market, and then the dollar will go up. That's what's happening right now. The issue is that the central bank has no foreign reserves to spend to defend anymore. So that peg of 466 is under pressure. It's no longer real because people know that the central bank cannot really defend the dollar as robust as it would have tried to do. Hence, you've seen the figure go from 466 all the way really to nearly 900 2 weeks ago. Now it's come back down to about 766 or 800. It's just a race, right? The market already knows the amount of bullets the CBN has. We know they only have 38 billion. And this is where the central bank is going to struggle going forward because we know what they can do. They can release 1 billion here and there and the Naira will crash, but the Naira will always recover because the demand for imports has not been curtailed. And the export earnings that are coming to Nigeria are no longer going to just the central bank. They're going to P2P, they're going to the other informal sector. So the CBN is actually in a very, very tight place. If it floats right now, the Naira will devalue depreciably because it cannot guarantee those monies will come to the central bank. But it has to float to compete with the P2P. I don't think the Naira value should be as high as 8 or even 750. But if the Naira is depreciated to a level that the market, the ordinary guy can say, I can accept this, that would reduce the amount of flow to the informal sector, increase that to the formal side, and it will increase CBN reserves. So the giveaway, the payoff for having a floated currency, right, is a more expensive dollar and a more robust foreign exchange reserves. You can't eat your cake and have it. It's either you have a strong Naira and weak reserves, or you have a weak Naira and strong reserves. It's one of the other. But that float is something that we'll have to address. Either we address it now or when the new president comes. It's got to be addressed by someone. Thank you so much, Ali. And let's get I've got Mr. what's his name? Justin Gordian. Sorry guys, Twitter names. I do apologize if I misspell your name. Justin, go ahead, sir. You got your hand is up.
Hi, Carlo.
How are you doing today?
Good evening. Thank you for very insightful knowledge sharing regarding exchange rate, international trade. A lot of comments here has been very educative and what you've shared with us. But what I want to say is that the Nigerian Export Promotion Council need to do a lot. The lady that spoke from, I think, Canada regarding the importation of yam into Canada, basically coming from Ghana, is because the importation from Ghana meets certain standards. Even the product that coming from China into Nigeria have a different standard when they are going to Europe and when they are going to North America. So beyond just being an agency, they need to just help exporters. It has to be a government policy that we use the Nigerian Export Promotion Council as a platform where we begin to drive a lot of forex into the country, in addition to what we get from crude oil and diaspora remittance. The reason why I say so is we have a lot of stuff produced in this country, but we are unable to sell because of standard. We are unable to sell because of packaging. We are unable to produce and sell because of the cost of production. Somebody mentioned power. I mean, taking your goods to tin can is like forcing a camel through the eye of a needle. I mean, the Nigerian Export Promotion Council has to go beyond the bureaucracy and engage the guys who are very intentional. And until we do that, we may not have any form of redemption regarding exchange rate. There's little or much that crude oil export can do for us at this time. The reason is this. If you take a look at the typical office or home in Nigeria, 97 or 98% of everything you find in anybody's home or office today are produced in China. What it basically means is that you're putting pressure on whatever reserve you have, which is majorly powered by crude oil sales. And until we begin to produce for whatever we consume here, the exchange rate is not going to come down. So I see a lot of people bashing you where you say exchange rate will go up. It will go up because you're consuming more and you're producing less. So Nigerian Export Promotion Council has to develop a strategy where they facilitate trade in such a manner that packaging, standardization, pricing, cost of production, will help the exporter, be able to sell to other markets other than Africa. Because to be very honest, if you're selling to Europe, you're going to make a lot of money. If you're going to sell to Canada, you're going to make a lot of money. If you're selling to UK, you're going to make a lot of money. But they are standards, and that is the major hurdles we currently have with what is produced in Nigeria. Until we fix that, we cannot really sell anything to the world, even if we really, really need Forex, to also defend some of these things we import from China and other parts of the world.
Hey, thanks. That's a long one, but yeah, a few points made there. I mean, the currency is going to get higher if things remain the way they are. That's just how I will put it, right? If we don't see inflow, but we see a lot of outflow and demand, then it's not going to stop the currency really going higher. Exports can help, but like you said, we've got to make our house cheaper. We have to be a bit more strategic in what we are looking for in terms of exports. And again, remittances are exports. So we've got to really refocus on how we define inflows, FPIs, FDIs, all well and good, but we have to look for how we can formalize remittances. If a Nigerian wants to send money home, I think state government, not just the federal, state governments can have a way where they can do what the Middle Eastern guys do, the informal transfer. I put this out there, right? If I was the governor of a state, I would go out to America and I'll try to get investments in a credit union in America. If you want to send money home, put your dollars in that credit union in America. The money will not leave America, but in the state, in my state, if I'm the governor, I will pay your naira for you. Then I am the state governor. I now have all these dollars in America, and I will turn around and sell that same dollars to Nigerian importers from Nigeria in my state, right? So if I was in Abia State, you want to send $100 in, go to credit union or whatever, put $100 in that credit union, and it's sitting down there. And I give you 100 naira, the same value from Nigeria right here. I can use my IGR and give it away to you, whoever you want to give it to. But I don't have your dollars in America that I can turn around and sell to an importer at the market price and make a spread. Just going to make a spread, because I have both the naira and the dollars outside the country. I'm not doing money transfer. I don't need a license. The money doesn't cross any border. It's sitting in the bank account in the US and a bank account in Nigeria. Why can't you do something as simple and basic as this? My friends do it. We all do it. You want to get dollars, you pay someone to naira to someone's account. The person pays your mom in Nigeria. So why can't the state or even the federal do something like this, right? And reduce the cost of sending money back and forth. I want to send money back home now. I'm looking for who will I give it to? How will I do it? Do I have to do wire transfer? Wire is $25. $25 to send a wire. So these are all small things that we can do to really, really get this stuff going, right? Let me get Esomosh, Global Igwe One. Go ahead, sir. You've got the floor.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
Well, this is actually a very nice, discourse. But everybody wants Nigeria to be exporting. But before we can actually, exploit this potential that we have when it comes to exporting, we have a very long way to go. Because let me take, for example, rice. So if Nigeria should say that we want to start exporting rice today, first, the local production, we have to be able to produce enough in this country before we can export. And from the quantity of rice that we are producing in Nigeria, then look at other things like quality. Do you know that? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, you, sir.
Okay. Do you know that something like in if you go to some places like Kano, there are actually many rice mills. Now I've gone to different rice mills in Kano. Mill. There is no measure to control this quality. There is no measure. So if I want this grain of rice, this grain length of rice, that I want to, this is the length of rice I will be. If I want.
So I'm so sorry. Your audio is very, very bad. I'm so sorry. If you can you really check and come right back in and let you in? But your audio is very, very bad. So I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
You're breaking up a bit. Okay, I've got Akin's O3.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity.
How you doing?
Yes, actually, I would like to, as you said earlier, agriculture is actually a low-hanging fruit for Nigeria where we could make a lot of income because if you look at the share of our GDP it contributes, as of 2019, it contributed over 21%. And even before that, at the time, it was about 27%, which means we should pay more attention to it. And talking of agriculture, I think the issue of inefficiency, we have to address it. Maybe in the way we use our resources, maybe land, labor, and other resources. The way we use in Nigeria is very, very inefficient. Fine, we have very large arable land, but we are not using it very well. For example, it's about 30 million hectares of arable land in Nigeria, whereas in Netherlands has about just a million hectares, but the productivity is very high. In fact, they're actually the second highest exporter of agricultural products in the world, whereas Nigeria, we can't even feed ourselves. We have to depend a lot on importation to feed our growing population. Also, apart from inefficiency, the issue of ease of doing business in Nigeria needs to be addressed, from registration of businesses to when they need to export, customs, taxes, quality control, and everything. Process looks so cumbersome that it becomes very, very difficult for people to take advantage of the opportunity in this. Then in terms of capital, the machineries are so little compared to what we have in others. Even credit is not there. The little we have, the people don't have access to it especially because of the issue of collateral and others. And when we talk of population, fine, we have the population, maybe 216 million people, and it's growing. Every 7 seconds, there's a new birth in Nigeria. And we have about 20 million people employed in agriculture. But when we look at the productivity and the output, it just doesn't commensurate with it. And in Netherlands, they have about 167,000 people employed in agriculture, whereas very, very high output and production. So I believe if we must take advantage of this low-hanging fruit, then we must work on efficiency and to make it easy to do business in Nigeria. Thank you. That will be my contribution for now.
Yeah, good one, Akin. I need you're reiterating that whole idea of the low-hanging fruit, right? The agricultural low-hanging fruit, and we'll have to just go after it. But also, let me just talk about other low-hanging fruits: entertainment, right? Nollywood, the music sector. I think there is something that can be done with the fintech, Nollywood, and entertainment in Nigeria that we're not really touching, right? Imagine if Burna Boy's music is, I know it's on all these other apps that are like a phone and all that, but you can put a little tag and say every song you download and all that would go to a particular, you can only download a particular song from a particular app and you can track intellectual property, and that's a revenue stream to someone, right? Entertainment is huge, and we really have not really tapped into it. Nollywood movies are sold everywhere in the world. Revenues, someone just prints the CDs, takes out of the country, right? We have to do the digital intellectual property, hold the master, and gain revenues of the digital copies or distribution of those masters. Let's also export that were not counted. It's also very, very huge apart from agriculture. So lots of things in my head about how we can earn and how we can boost the export. Remember, guys, the issue is not really this export. Are we importing? Are we importing? Are we importing? Because we've seen the example of Singapore and Hong Kong. You can actually import 100%, or you can import more than your GDP as long as you're exporting more of your GDP. The actual export is really not that important for us. What's important for us is the net export. So import, go ahead and import, but make sure you are exporting. Actually, the story that we're trying to pass along. So thanks for that, right? Let's get Harry E. Harry E, you've got the floor. Go ahead. Harry E, you've got the floor, sir. All right, let's get Maduka. Maduka Ugochukwu. Go ahead.
Can I go on, sir? Yeah. Sir?
Yeah, Harry, go ahead. Maduka, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I thank you for this opportunity, to learn and also improve the economy and also the business in the country. I believe we have lots of opportunities, to explore. We have the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreements, and we are the Africa's largest economy, but we are not really maximizing that. I recall, when the woman that, talked about Canada, seeing the Ghana yam, talked about that. I was pained because I'm a media person. I was at a function when Minister Ugobo was, saying stuff about that these yams are actually Nigerian yams. And he was, very, very categorical about that. But we also look through, I think I posted that question to him, why do our products keep getting rejected, all the time? This, but they don't at some point. The fire code sanitary conditions, as it were. Why don't we do things well for once? And he said efforts are being made to do that, but at some point, politics happened. He couldn't return as the minister in 2019, and I don't know, because there are lots of committees formed. I don't really know what happened to that committee. I have been writing to them to give us information there, but they've not really been responding positively with regards to that. So I don't know, from the NEPC end, the Ministry of Agriculture, even customs. Customs should also facilitate trade. Not just collecting duty and all that. They should enable trade. I believe that if the relevant agencies are really pushful in enabling business environment and also, helping people in this value chain, we would do a whole lot more, to create wealth for our people and also to, help to grow the economy, as it were. And some of these forest crises we are having could also be adequately attended to. Thank you very much. That's just my observation.
Yeah, good. I mean, it's all back to this, like the admin side of the exports, right? That's what's going on with us. That we're not really sorting out that admin side. What kind of pesticides, what paperwork is needed, why are they being rejected? Beans are rejected from Europe, and we're really sorting it out. So I think that's for the administrators to just sort of come in and help our farmers. Guys, we'll spend give or take about, I would say, about an hour and 30 minutes. We've been talking really about import, export trade. We've given an overview of import. We've related that to export. We've made the point that Nigeria really does not do a lot of import if you compare to the GDP, right? We've compared ourselves to South Africa, to Ghana, to Hong Kong, to Singapore. We've seen our numbers imports to GDP are quite low, right? We also compared also the export side, and we saw we're also not doing well on that export side. Our exports to GDP is also pretty low when compared to Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, the same Singapore, and of course the same Hong Kong. So we can do more on both sides. We can do more exports, and we don't really mind doing more imports as long as we have a net positive export figure. I think that's what we are talking about. And then touching on the naira exchange rate, the more we export, the more we earn more naira, the more we get more wealth. And we've also identified the key driver really is that local cost. Local costs are simply too expensive. If we're able to reduce the cost of doing business in Nigeria, this allows us to add more value either in export size and to also reduce the cost of doing business in Nigeria. So just a reset of the room, right? I want the home stretch now, about 20 minutes more before we call it quits with today. Ox Eniola, how are you doing? You've got the floor. Please go.
Carlos, I was supposed to go after Henry.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Ox, could you just hold on? I've got Maduka here. Ox, you're going to go next.
Okay.
Do upload. Maduka, you've got the floor. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, great. Thanks. Good evening, Kalu, and good evening, everybody. So what I really want to talk about is the how. I mean, we've talked about, the issues and what we think we can, but I want to talk about the how. And I think this is my very simple solution. I think the Export Promotion Council, the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, government should set up some sort of joint task force with the Nigerian Export Promotion Council heading that task force. Now, what they should do, two ways. The first way is, working with regional state governments to set up some sort of places where we have comparative advantage in terms of what we're doing there. This is focusing on agriculture. For example, where we typically will grow in the country or rice and all that. So have those clusters where the farmers can belong to those clusters and cluster to pass information, strategic information that would help them prepare, store and package their products in line with the standards that, of course, the joint task force gets from the countries we want to export our products to. It's on one side. And then in doing that, partner with the NIITA, that's the Institute of Agriculture, partner with them to help those clusters and educate them. Now that's on one side. On the other side, have the same Export Promotion Council in a joint task force with customs, with private industry, with insurers, and have it in like a one-stop shop where someone who wants to export, depending on where you are in the value chain, even as a farmer or as an aggregator, you want to export, you can visit the council, and going through the process, every organization or government agency you need to meet, you need to get approvals, you need to do anything. You can do all of that, with the joint task force all at one go. And then finally, the government created special export channels for agriculture and maybe for manufactured goods. Now, what these channels will do is take away all the bureaucracy and bottlenecks that we have with the typical issues we have at our ports, and create those channels where when you want to export, everything is pretty straightforward. It's digitalized. You can go through all the process online. It's transparent, and then you have all your contacts. Everything is all lined up for you, and make it easy for people to export. Take away all the hidden costs of exporting. You're paying customs money that is not registered anywhere. You're paying for levies and fines and all of that is not, registered anywhere in the law. Remove all those inefficiencies, create those channels for people to export. And I think Nigerians are really hardworking people. If you give us that kind of room to grow, people will take a lot of advantage of it. And that's my solution as to the how on improving our export earnings. Thanks, Carlo.
Thanks so much for that, Madaka. That was good. Again, let me just make a few points, not to diminish yours, right? But I mean, why can't we just make all the ports work efficiently, really? So we don't have to have these special export points, but just make everything work normally. If it's bringing money to the economy, it should work, right? That's just what I want to say on that. And again, I have to go back to NEPC. NEPC just does have a very, very robust website. You also have the Nigerian Imports Processing. What's it? NIPC, Nigerian Investment Promotion Council. Those guys have a lot of information, data, step-by-step guides for you if you really want to get started. So I would say there's lots of stuff out there if you are interested. And you don't have to, again, you don't have to be an exporter or an importer. You can just be a service provider. Like I told you, Lagos, if you go to K2, you see those women coming in with rickety cars, bringing in the tomatoes, the plantains that we eat every day. You can be a transporter. You can just have containerized cars that go to the farms and bring in just the goods by transport into Lagos. You can own the storehouses that basically store these goods. You can own the nitrogen or should we say the equipment that freeze dries these agricultural products. You can own the weighing machines. You can own the logistics. There are a lot you can do on the value chain. We don't all have to export, right? But with a big gap in Nigeria in terms of where we want to be and what we're doing right now. And all those are opportunities that we can take advantage of. I've got Ox Eniola. Ox, you've got the floor now. Go ahead, sir. Thank you so much for waiting.
Good evening, everyone. Please, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well, sir.
Yes. I would like to talk about financial products, exporting of financial products. So right now, it's easy for a Nigerian to get an Amazon stock or a Google stock than getting a Guinness Nigerian stock. Yes, you can easily get a mobile app like Robinhood and buy an Amazon stock. So Nigeria we can also export our financial products. An example is derivatives, derivatives are products that in which the price tracks the underlying asset. So a good example is yam, the yam. So we can create a derivative for yam. So this asset will track the price of yam in the Nigerian economy. So these assets can be offered to the external world in which traders can buy and sell these assets. They can lend these assets. They can borrow these assets. You get. So now we have.
Why would I want to buy and sell yam?
Why you want to? Is the same reason for, if you look at it as speculation. Why do people buy cryptocurrencies? You understand? People are betting on sometimes the price. Most times, also people also want to lend the assets. Just like platforms like Aave, you can lend and borrow different cryptocurrency. So if we put these assets, if we create derivatives for these assets and put them on places, a platform like the blockchain, where the general world can actually trade and buy this asset, I think that will actually be able to improve our foreign.
We already have. Okay, I'm just making compensation. We already have commodities exchange in Nigeria. So there's what's the name? The NCOM, Nigeria Commodities Exchange. Buy paddy rice. What you're talking about?
Yes, something like that. But also offering it to the external world, aside from just Nigeria itself.
So just like commodities exchange, not really the derivative. Yeah, because derivative is more or less a derivative of something. You actually mean to buy an actual contract that owns yams in a warehouse. How are you going to?
Something like that.
Okay.
But this asset actually traded. You understand? If you buy the derivative, you don't own the yam. The yam is not with you. You understand? You just bought an asset that tracks the price of yam.
Yeah,
you understand?
You already have the, and I'm very careful about asking people just to trade naked on an asset. You're already going into trading what I hear you say is that you just trade, not for the export, just to trade to generate the churn. And I'm careful about that. That's more of gambling, right?
You can trade. You can also lend and borrow it.
Yeah, but bro, I mean, we let's just keep it simple, right? I have yam. I take the yam, I do a forward contract. You can come to me as a farmer, buy from me. There's a port, it's in a warehouse. Exactly what the Nigerian Commodity Exchange is right now. It's pretty simple to do, right? Once you start to see trade, borrow, buy, you are doing synthetic contracts, a lot of risk in that. I would just be careful. But I like the idea. I mean, why not? Why don't we look at export of like you said, financial products? Like it, but let's come down a bit. But not a bad idea.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Appreciate it. Hey, Chisom, you've got the floor. Go ahead. Chisom.
Oh, great. Yes, thank you. Well, I've been listening to the conversation, and I think it's very interesting. This idea of production, I think, is one very fundamental thing that we have to take into account. I mean, agriculture is good, but the level we are doing it now is far too like the infant level. There's something they call the structural transformation. We're supposed to move from a very well-developed agricultural sector, primary products, into manufacturing, and then into services. But we kind of jumped, the first step in a way, and we kind of moved more into services now. But we have to now go back and do the work we missed out. Now in Nigeria, for the entire country of, almost 200 million people, we have just 7,000 tractors that are functional, according to the Farmers Association.
How many?
In the whole country. Yes, 7,000. You can Google it. 7,000. I was shocked. This is as at this year. So if you divide it, that is 0.2 tractors for 1,000 people. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. If you look at Iceland, they have a population of just over 300,000 people. They have about 37 tractors for 1,000 people. I'm living right now. I live in India, and they have so many tractors. Like, they have a company that manufactures tractors. Actually, the Mahindra company, the Tata company, they manufacture the thing, and every year they produce maybe up to 200,000 or 300,000 units, and then they export as well. So if you compare that to 7,000 tractors that are functioning in Nigeria right now, you see that it's just impossible to achieve the kind of scale we need to get to. And this idea of manufacturing supporting agriculture is also important, because agriculture is not going to grow if manufacturing doesn't grow at a equally even faster pace. We need a functioning steel industry. We need a functioning electricity or power, because all these things there's a feedback loop. So you don't try and start building something when there's no foundation. We don't have a lot of foundational things that we have to get. The government will play a great role in that, but I think the private sector also can do something. We need steel to be able to build tractors, and we need tractors to be able to to improve our agricultural sector. So there's a lot of things that are foundational. Power is also very important. If you don't have power, how do you get manufacturing to work? So we need a government that that is focused on this particular topic, put a lot of energy and a lot of focus into it, get the fundamentals right, and then begin to build and do the hard work, because it's going to be hard work. It's not going to be easy. It's a lot of things to build from here. We're almost at ground zero. So but the potential is the goal is the potential is really high. It's massive. We can have double-digit growth if we get the fundamentals right. That's my contribution. Thank you for the opportunity.
And Chisom, just since you're here, just to also follow up with you, right? We have a tractor manufacturing company in Nigeria. Steyr. Steyr is in Bauchi State. It's not working. Steyr. We also have Bertola machine tool that does a lot of machine tools. I think they're in Lagos. I think somewhere in Ogun State or so. Also not working. So it's not for a lack of effort. That Nigeria has, if you look at the plans, the structure, the DNA, Nigeria is set up to succeed. But why is Steyr not working? But we have the presidential air fleets all working. You will think that since the focus is to do agriculture to diversify, that company should have been number one company that we want to revive and make sure it works. I mean, Bauchi has a lot of strategic agricultural companies in Nigeria. A lot. There's one I'm going to highlight very soon on the spaces. You guys, your minds will be blown away in Bauchi State. You know, that state, one of the most endowed in terms of industrial setup, but it's just, where is it today? You know, where is it? Nowhere. So why isn't a company like Steyr working? How can we have in entire Nigeria 7,000 tractors, and you have a company that manufactures tractors not working? I mean, is it policy? Is it that we don't know? Or we can spend money to import PMS, but we can't spend money to revive this factory? Do you have any follow-up on that?
Well, I mean, I didn't even know that factory existed, because it's not producing. You know, as I just said, it's the fundamentals. You know, there's a lot of policy, you know, backing that has to be there, and also infrastructure that has to be there. But if those fundamentals are not there, you know, just bringing a company and asking them to set up shop, you know, they can be successful for a little while, and you know, if they don't have the market as well, that could also be a challenge, because if they don't have people who have the money or the financing to pay for it, people don't pay for tractors one off. It has to be something that you take a financing, you know, arrangement. But many farmers in Nigeria are not going to be willing to do that. You know, and then the structure itself, you know, the banking system also has to be strengthened. You don't have a proper credit system. I mean, it's just a lot of, you know, soft and hard infrastructure that needs to be in place, you know, to facilitate all these things to move faster. So it's a myriad of different things that have to come together at the same time, I think.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hello, Carlo. But if I may just add to what Chisholm said, I think when you mentioned that question, I think it's years of lazy rent collection from oil that has caused us this problem. So our infrastructure and our support systems have not matured or developed to, you know, back this kind of export-focused outlook for the country. So we spent years collecting money from oil and sharing to the states, and it has really deep into the culture in the country, you know, and it's also affected our education. You know, everybody just wants to sit somewhere and collect money from rent, basically. So nobody's really driving the entrepreneurial spirit that you would expect to help push out this.
Let me give you a story, right? There's a company that used to be in River State, LMA Petrochemical. It was dead, dying. Indians come here, they buy it, they revived it. That company is making so much profit, paying so much dividends to Nigeria and River State, doing fertilizers and petrochemicals and chemicals from that factory. It's so valuable today. So you wonder, why was it dead? And it's the exact same thing with this same Steyr. Tomorrow, a Chinese company is going to come and buy it. And they're going to start to make tractors from that company, and they'll go be exporting. I'll be like, oh, we want to go. And then the state will go and tax them. Look at the example with Kogi, Dangote, and the issue with Obajana. Was Obajana making a profit? Were those BCC Cement, was it making a profit? But you might say it's controversial. Dangote buys them, right? Now they're making tons of profit. Then the state goes and says, oh, you owe us shares. We're supposed to have been giving shares 10 years ago. So why didn't you go 10 years ago and invest? You never invested. So there's this disconnect in Nigeria between we see potential and we ignore it, but once it makes it, we want to go ahead and tax it. The telecom guys, 44 separate taxes. 44. We're taxing MTN, all those guys. 44 separate taxes. But a while ago, Nitel was there, dead. No one went there. So big problems all around. Agbo, we've got you, sir. Hi, Mr. Agbo. Go ahead. You've got the floor.
I'm very good. And how are you doing, Carlo?
Very, very well, sir. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick one to just contribute to what has been said. Well, I think I'll just look at the issues of, some of the fundamentals. When you talk of agriculture, you can't. Agriculture is there, fine. But agriculture that is not done at scale is still as not profitable as any other venture. It's just like having multiple fragmentations that you cannot agree. So for me, agriculture has a huge potential, but except if we develop the sector, which starts from the issue of the land right first, okay? That's a major fundamental issue. So a core development person or someone who wants to make a critical investment in the sector cannot come in when he's not sure whether the government can take away the right to the land or access to the land any day. So a governor comes in and he's not happy with what you are doing, he can decide to revoke your access to the property that you've developed, and then you put in place for the kind of scale that the production you want to work in. So the issue of land right it's at the fundamental or at the base of this whole issue. So if that is resolved, then core proper development in the sector can come in. For example, you are talking about agriculture. Let's name it something like rice, for instance. It requires intense land development, and it's long term. Okay, I'll travel around the country. I'll supervise some projects, and I saw what the projects that the World Bank did in some of the states that ran into millions of dollars. But if you get there right now, they are abandoned. You see multiple sprinklers, mounted in different places for irrigation farming. We have one here in Abuja. We have most of these projects scattered in most of the states that are not functional today. Nobody is making use of it. So if we don't solve the fundamental issue, one, the issue of the land right issue, and then the issue of who owns this land resolved, then we cannot even start talking about how do we develop this. Because if you say, okay, we're going to help the peasant farmers and all that, if you look at the cost of production, we've tried to do this. I can tell you, you can't survive at scale until you mechanize properly. And you can't mechanize until you have access to land that you can develop for at least 30 years. You are sure you have access to that property for the next 30, 40 years. So that by the time you bring in infrastructure into that space, no government can wake up one morning and say that he's no longer interested or he wants to revoke the right or access to that property. So that one forms the major fundamental issue. So if we want to really revamp the agriculture sector, we have to actually start. Okay, and then we now talk about the issue of now, if you're also talking about the export requirements, there is a framework developed that if you have this kind of aggregated skill, or you have 1,000 hectares, you have 2,000 hectares or 3,000, what Olam is doing, Olam is exporting. But because you can actually monitor what you do at the you can use this framework or this template to track the volume of chemicals used in growing these crops. So that by the time you are ready for export, it will not be rejected within the EU or the US. By the time it gets there, you don't have excessive pesticide or excessive herbicides or some of these impurities that are found within the product. So you can't do that within a peasant structure where you have 70% or 80% of production coming from rural farmers that you cannot really track what they are doing at the farm level. So we need to think towards proper mechanization if we really want to revamp the sector. Otherwise, all these multiple talks, even if you develop the port and all that, it will contribute. But if you don't deal with the fundamental issue, we can't have a significant headway. You now talk about the issue of logistics. So we talked about an export processing zone that does not have a rail track that links it from the major producing zones to this export producing zone. Okay, now if we have these producing zones like the belt, like the middle belt, and these other major belts like the Kano, the Katsina axis, and the rest of them that are linked directly to the port, where we have the companies who package these products ready for export. And these things can happen within a space of 24 hours, like we have in other European countries, as well. Then that way you can see production linking directly to the ports. So you don't need to stress yourself or go in the extra mile. Right, because for example, now you produce, just like the same issue we had with Dangote to the tomato factory. By the time you've harvested, before you move from the farm to the factory, the integrity of this tomato is no longer, you can't process it anymore. So it's the same thing with other products as well. So if we don't look at this issue, then it becomes a critical issue that we don't even know where to start. You'll just be talking from one end, and then the main fundamental issues are not properly handled. You see, it's also the same issue or the same challenge with the extractive industry as the mining industry as well. So we have a lot of a lot of raw materials inland, but even when you mine, you can move them. So the same logistical challenge as well. And then I also talk about the role of the subnationals. So, we need to also take some of this advocacy down to the subnational level. There's a lot the subnational government can do. There's so much they can do. And if we don't bring them up to speed, no matter what is done at the national level, we can't mainstream at the subnational level. All right. So let the state government put themselves in place. Okay, right now, thank God for the policy for, at least for the power sector. The state government can now invest in the power sector. So who are going to drive this advocacy to make sure that the state government begin to prioritize their own investment in the power sectors, so that we are not just talking about what is happening at the national level. What can the subnational government do? How can you position your state to become investment ready, that investors can come in and invest, and then create the kind of environment that will be needed for the other subsectors? If you're looking at the extractive industry, that it can thrive, you're looking at agriculture, that it can thrive, and then remove all these multiple taxations that are within the road network. So we have a lot that can be done, and that if it is done, then our export can grow, and then the foreign exchange earning can also grow, simultaneously with it. So you can't be talking about increasing your earnings when you are producing nothing. I think that's just my little take on this. I think I will stop here.
I think a lot. You covered a lot in your short little something there. You did cover a lot, right? And I think the where I want to just touch on this is the Land Use Act you brought up, right? Very, very important. Very, very important that we really can do a lot of agricultural revolutionary, should we say, output or investment if we don't touch that Land Use Act. What it does, Land Use Act makes land, an asset. But that asset is only yours if a human being called the governor signs a paper for you. Why is this important? If you're a farmer in, say, Kogi, and you own 2 hectares of land, you might farm on that land. It might be yours from your family for decades. But if you go to a bank to get a loan and you say, I own that land, the bank won't listen to you because you have no paper to show you own that land. To show you own that land, you have to go to your state, get a title, and get that title signed by the governor so there can be an equitable mortgage towards that land. If you can't do that, then you've trapped that wealth that would have been yours just in thin air. You can't basically own or securitize the equity of that land that has been owned by your family for decades. So Land Use Act, if it is properly amended, would allow those farmers to immediately get equity, which means that land becomes collateral for long-term loans. So if I have land in my village, I can securitize it. I can go to the bank and say, this is collateral for that loan. That's instant wealth for me. It's called dead capital. You make it alive when you do it this way, right? And that's what we're getting wrong. So we have to also revisit the Land Use Act so that we can boost the accumulation of landed assets that can be used for large-scale mechanized agriculture. Banks want collateral. They want title. They don't want family land letters saying Kalu owns this plot of land. No, they want a title signed by the state. So why don't you just change it and say the governor is going to sign it? The same way if I buy shares in a stock exchange, the governor does not sign my share certificate. The stock exchange has a centralized registry. So you can use a blockchain to do C of O. It can't be forged, right? So if a C of O is attached to a blockchain, it cannot be forged. Then it can be transferred in 24 hours because if you transfer it illegally, it's right there. I can track it, it's open and all that. So if you're able to do that, you are able to expand and should say bring in a lot of dead capital into the formal space, and then you can run with it. All right, guys. Any very soon. Cliff, you've got the floor. We'll do Cliff. I don't know if Agbo has spoken. So Cliff, Agbo, ZY, and then we'll call today. Hi, Cliff. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Carl, for having me. So basically, when you gave that scenario, or you painted that scenario about the LMA petrochemical, something struck me, and it was in line with the chain of thought that I had before you created that scenario. That, when you look at some of the people that these are foreign guys that are coming to Nigeria to do business, like the Lebanese, the Indians, the Chinese. They seem to be able to operate within this stringent environment that we're talking about. And in my mind, I've been thinking that, is it high time that we get to the point where we start brainstorming on how to overcome some of these challenges that we're having? And what I mean is trying to exploit some of these challenges and turn it to our own advantage and see how we can. Because since I was born, I know that this power issue has been there. It looks like if you look at the trend of events happening in Nigeria over time, it looks like every year or every dispensation, it gets worse. And also, you look at the way people who are supposed to be driving policies or who are in the governance process, how they've been operating over time. They are not interested in helping businesses to thrive. But one thing is for sure, we have natural resources, we have, all human resources, and all these things can be harnessed. So do we keep waiting for when the government will get things right so that we will improve our ability to manufacture and export, while other people like the Chinese and Lebanese come in, look at how tough the environment is, see what will work for them, and they're making serious money? Is there any model that our manufacturers can actually learn from these guys and start implementing them so that we move beyond the conversations around what challenges we're having and start, trying to get results from doing something?
I'm not sure I get the question, Cliff. Could you take it again, please?
Okay, so I was saying that the model that the Chinese, the Lebanese, and also the Indians adopt when they come to Nigeria, is there anything that entrepreneurs or manufacturers can learn from these models? Because they seem to be harnessing whatever potentials are within this same environment where we think that everything is comatose, and they are making serious profit from these things.
I think it's many things really. Especially for the Chinese, they have access to low cost capital from their home countries. That's the number one thing. So if I see, like I've talked about Bauchi. There's an industry. There's a company in Bauchi I want to go buy, but because I'm going to do a turnaround, right? Sorry about that. Because I'm going to do a turnaround, I need to get patient capital, at least 5 years capital that I can borrow, invest, and not pay a return. So